My name is Kelsey Barrett, and the worst day of my professional life started in a conference room I'd sat in 100 times before. I was surrounded by my entire team. 12 people. Colleagues I'd worked alongside for 3 years. We'd celebrated birthdays together, shared coffee and complaints, built reports and presentations side by side. Now, they wouldn't look at me. Trevor stood at the head of the long table. Our department manager. Tall, confident, expensive suit. Vanessa from HR sat beside him with her tablet glowing in her hands. Her expression was neutral, professional, cold. Trevor had called this meeting an hour ago. The calendar invite had just said urgent team meeting, attendance mandatory. No agenda, no context. My stomach had been churning since I saw it. Then he said my name. Kelsey, this concerns you directly. The room went silent. Every head turned toward me. My face immediately burned hot. Trevor slid a printed document across the table. It stopped right in front of me. The header read Performance Improvement Plan. I stared at it. The words didn't make sense. This had to be a mistake. Trevor started talking. His voice was calm, almost kind. He listed my alleged failures out loud in front of everyone. Missed deadlines. Sloppy work. Resistance to feedback. Unprofessional behavior toward leadership. Each word felt like a punch to the chest. I tried to speak, tried to defend myself, but he just kept going. This is a formal warning, Kelsey. You have 30 days to improve. If you can't meet our standards, we'll need to discuss your future here. Nobody said a word. Nobody looked at me. I stared down at the paper. My hands were shaking. I'd never missed a deadline. Not once in 3 years. This wasn't real, but the document had my name on it. Official signatures. Dates. It was real. 3 weeks earlier, everything had been completely normal. I was working late on a Tuesday night, finishing up the quarterly compliance report for our department. Most of the office had cleared out by 6. I liked the quiet. It helped me focus. Cascade Financial Services was a mid-sized investment firm. I worked as a compliance analyst. My job was to review risk exposure, audit internal transactions, and make sure we were following regulations. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. And I was good at it. Trevor stopped by my desk around 7:30. He had a coffee in one hand and his usual relaxed smile. He leaned casually against my cubicle wall, like we were just having a friendly chat. Hey, Kelsey.
Quick question, he said.
Can you adjust a few figures in the Q2 compliance report before you submit it? Nothing major. Just smooth out some of the risk exposure numbers. They look a little worse than they actually are. I looked up from my screen. Adjust them how? He waved his hand like it was no big deal. The client services team is panicking over the optics. I just need the data to look cleaner. You know how executives get. I hesitated. I can double-check the calculations, but the numbers should be accurate. Right, he said quickly. Just make sure it tells the right story. We're a team, yeah? He smiled again and walked away before I could respond. After he left, I sat there for a minute feeling uneasy. Then I pulled up the raw data. I went through every line item, every formula, every source. The numbers weren't wrong. They were accurate. And they were bad. The risk exposure was real and significant. Adjusting them wouldn't be smoothing things over. It would be falsifying a compliance report. 2 days later, Trevor called me into his office. This time, his tone was different. He wasn't casual or friendly. He closed the door behind me and sat down behind his desk. His jaw was tight. Kelsey, we need to talk about the Q2 report. I sat down across from him. My stomach was already twisting. The executives are breathing down my neck on this, he said. The report needs to tell the right story. We can't afford to look unstable right now. He slid a revised version of my compliance document across the desk. I picked it up and scanned it quickly. The risk exposure figures had been cut almost in half. The liability projections were gone entirely. None of it matched the real data I'd pulled from our transaction systems. I need you to sign off on this version as the preparer, Trevor said, tapping the bottom of the page. My throat went dry. Trevor, I can't. This data isn't accurate. It doesn't match the actual numbers. His expression hardened. His eyes went cold. I'm really disappointed in your lack of flexibility, Kelsey. I thought you understood how things work here. I do understand, I said carefully. But I can't certify data I know is false. It could cost me my license. He leaned back in his chair and stared at me for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he smiled tightly. Think about it over the weekend. We'll talk Monday. I left his office feeling shaky. My heart was pounding. I didn't sign the document. I couldn't. Certifying falsified compliance data wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. It could end my career. It could result in personal liability. Trevor had to know that. But he'd asked me to do it anyway. I didn't sign the document. On Monday morning, everything changed. Trevor walked past my desk without saying good morning. He didn't make eye contact. In our 10 o'clock team meeting, I asked a question about a client account, and he gave me a clipped, one-word answer. His tone was ice cold. Then, halfway through the meeting, he reassigned one of my key projects, the Morgan account. I'd been managing it for 8 months. He gave it to Sam, a junior analyst who'd only been with the company for 6 months. No warning. No explanation. Just a casual announcement in front of the whole team. After the meeting, I caught up with Trevor in the hallway. Can I ask why you pulled me off the Morgan account? He didn't even slow down. I need someone who's more aligned with leadership priorities. What does that mean? He stopped and turned to face me. His expression was blank. It means I need people I can count on, Kelsey. People who are team players. Then he walked away. I stood there in the hallway, stunned. The message was clear. This was retaliation. He was punishing me for refusing to falsify the report. And I knew, deep in my gut, that it was only going to get worse. That night I sat at my kitchen table staring at my laptop. I pulled up the original compliance data and looked at it again. I hadn't been wrong. The numbers were solid. The risk was real. But Trevor didn't care about accuracy. He cared about optics. And I'd just become a problem he needed to eliminate. Over the next week, the retaliation came in small, constant cuts. Trevor started CCing me on emails pointing out mistakes I hadn't actually made. He'd forward a report to the team with a note like, Kelsey, please be more careful with formatting in the future, on a document I hadn't even touched. He scheduled last-minute meetings during my already approved PTO requests without asking if I could move them. When I pointed it out, he said, "This is a business priority. We all make sacrifices." In team huddles, he started publicly praising other people for work I'd contributed to. Anna got credit for a presentation I'd built. Sam got recognized for analysis I'd provided. Then, in a Friday afternoon team meeting, Trevor introduced a new accountability initiative. He said some people on the team had been coasting, and it was time to raise the bar and get serious about performance. He didn't say my name, but he looked directly at me twice while he said it. After the meeting, I walked past Anna in the hallway. We'd worked together for 2 years. She saw me coming and suddenly turned down a different corridor. Another coworker, Mark, pulled me aside in the break room. "Hey, is everything okay?" he asked quietly. "What do you mean?" He looked uncomfortable. "I don't know. Trevor mentioned some people were struggling. I just wanted to check in." I stared at him. Trevor was spreading rumors. He was planting seeds of doubt, making people think I was underperforming before I even realized what was happening. He was isolating me, building a narrative,
Turning the team against me.
I felt myself disappearing. That weekend, I made a decision. I started keeping records. I didn't have a concrete plan yet. I just knew I needed proof. I created a secure folder on my personal cloud storage account. I went back through my work email and took screenshots of every interaction I'd had with Trevor over the past 3 weeks. The initial request to adjust the data, the follow-up meeting, the reassignment of my project. I saved the original compliance data in multiple places. I kept a copy of the falsified version Trevor had shown me. I compared them side by side and documented every discrepancy. I started forwarding key emails to my personal account. I used vague subject lines like meeting notes or project files so nobody would notice. I began keeping a daily log in a private document. Every interaction with Trevor, I wrote it down. Date, time, what was said, who else was present. I recorded everything. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with all this documentation, but I knew that in situations like this, your word against a manager's word isn't enough. You need evidence. You need receipts. You need proof that what you're saying actually happened. So I built my case quietly, methodically, one screenshot at a time. The following week, Trevor held a department-wide meeting. He stood at the front of the room with a slide deck pulled up on the screen. The title read, Accountability and Excellence Initiative. He talked about raising standards, about how some team members had been coasting and it was time to get serious, about how leadership was watching and we all needed to step up. He never said my name,
But he looked at me.
multiple times. Long, pointed looks that everyone else noticed. After the meeting ended, I tried to make small talk with a colleague I'd worked closely with for over 2 years. She mumbled something about needing to get back to her desk and practically ran out of the room. Later that afternoon, Mark approached me again near the printer. He glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Hey, just so you know, Trevor's been talking about performance issues in leadership meetings, he said quietly. I don't know details, but I thought you should know. My chest tightened. Did he mention me specifically? Mark hesitated. Not by name, but people are making assumptions. I felt sick. Trevor wasn't just retaliating anymore. He was actively destroying my reputation. He was poisoning the well, making sure that when he finally moved against me officially, everyone would already believe I deserved it. He was setting the stage. Then I found something I wasn't supposed to see. I was accidentally copied on an internal email chain between Trevor and the VP of Client Services, a man named Philip Brennan. It was clearly a mistake. I shouldn't have been included on the thread. In the email, Trevor referenced the updated Q2 compliance summary and reassured Philip that risk exposure has been mitigated per the revised models. He said everything was clean and ready for the board presentation. My heart started pounding. I immediately opened our internal document repository and pulled the official compliance report that had been submitted to senior leadership. It wasn't the version I'd prepared. It was the falsified version. The one with the altered risk numbers. The one I'd refused to sign. I scrolled to the bottom of the document. And there, in the prepare field, were my initials. Kelsey Barrett, Compliance Analyst. He hadn't just pressured me to sign off on false data. When I refused, he'd gone ahead and submitted it anyway. He'd forged my approval. He'd falsified a regulatory document and put my name on it. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands shaking. This wasn't just retaliation anymore. This was fraud. And he'd made me complicit without my knowledge or consent. I immediately saved the email chain. I downloaded the falsified report. I saved the original version I'd prepared with the correct data. I saved everything to my encrypted cloud folder. Trevor had just handed me a smoking gun. A few days later, I noticed I'd been removed from the weekly leadership sync meeting. It was a standing invite I'd had for over a year. Suddenly, it was gone from my calendar. I walked over to Trevor's assistant, a woman named Brianna. Hey, I think I got dropped from the leadership sync by accident. Can you add me back? She looked uncomfortable.
Oh,
Trevor said the meeting is strategic level only now. I've been in that meeting for a year, I said. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm just telling you what he told me. Later that afternoon, I tried to access a shared compliance database I used multiple times every day. A message popped up on my screen. Access denied. Contact your administrator. I immediately emailed IT. They responded within an hour. Per request from your direct manager, your permissions to the compliance shared drive were downgraded to view-only access. I read the email 3 times. Trevor was systematically locking me out, removing my access to systems, erasing me from key meetings. He was building a paper trail that made it look like I wasn't essential, like I wasn't performing, like I didn't belong. He was creating documentation to justify firing me. I decided I needed to go to HR. I scheduled a confidential meeting with Vanessa Cole, the HR business partner assigned to our department. The calendar invite just said discussion. When I walked into her office, she smiled politely and gestured for me to sit. But before I could say anything, she spoke first. Before we begin, Kelsey, I want you to know that we take performance concerns very seriously here. There are resources available if you're struggling. Coaching, training, support programs. You're not alone. I froze. I'm sorry, what? She gave me a sympathetic look. It's okay to ask for help. There's no shame in it. And then I understood. Trevor had already been here. He'd already spoken to HR. He'd already framed me as a struggling, underperforming employee before I ever had a chance to tell my side of the story. I tried to explain. I told her about Trevor's request to falsify the compliance report. I told her about the retaliation, the reassigned projects, the removed access, the forged report submitted under my name. Vanessa listened. She took notes, but her expression stayed polite and detached. I could see it in her eyes.
She didn't believe me.
I'll make a note of your concerns, she said carefully. But I want to be honest with you, Kelsey. Your manager has expressed concerns about your performance. If there are areas where you're struggling, the best path forward is to engage constructively with the improvement process. I left her office feeling like the walls were closing in. Trevor had outmaneuvered me. He got into HR first. He'd controlled the narrative. I was trapped. A few days later, I ran into Beth Donovan in the lobby of our building. She used to work in our department as a senior analyst, but she'd transferred to another division about 6 months ago. We'd always gotten along well. She was smart, competent, and kind. She saw me and smiled. Kelsey, how are you? I must have looked terrible because her smile faded immediately. Do you have time for coffee? She asked.
I almost said no.
I didn't want to burden anyone, but something in her expression made me say yes. We sat down in the coffee shop across the street. She asked how things were going with Trevor. And I broke. I told her everything. The falsified report. The retaliation. The performance improvement plan I knew was coming. Her face went hard. She set down her coffee cup carefully. He did the same thing to me, she said quietly. I stared at her. What? Beth explained that about a year ago, Trevor had pressured her to bury a client complaint. A serious one. The client had alleged unauthorized trades. Beth had wanted to escalate it to compliance and legal. Trevor told her to handle it quietly. When she refused, he started writing her up for minor infractions, attitude issues, failure to collaborate, insubordination. He made her life so miserable that she transferred to another department just to survive. I never formally reported it, she said, her voice tight. I didn't think anyone would believe me. He's too good at covering his tracks. I felt sick. I wasn't the first person Trevor had done this to. And if I didn't fight back, I wouldn't be the last. Beth reached across the table and squeezed my hand. If you decide to fight this, I'll back you up. I'll tell them what he did to me. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. Back in the conference room, Trevor was still talking. But I wasn't listening anymore. I stared down at the performance improvement plan in front of me. My pulse roared in my ears. The document listed all my supposed failures. Missed deadlines that had never been missed. Errors I'd never made. Complaints from colleagues that didn't exist. It was all lies. But it was official. Documented. Signed by Trevor and Vanessa from HR. I thought about the folder on my cloud drive. The emails. The screenshots. The falsified compliance report with my forged initials. Beth's story. The pattern of abuse. Trevor slid a pen across the table toward me. If you'll just sign here, we can move forward with the improvement plan. I looked up at him. His expression was calm. Confident. He thought this was over. He thought he'd won. I need time to review this, I said. His smile faltered slightly. There's really nothing to review. This is standard process. I still want time to read through it carefully. His jaw tightened.
Fine.
You have until Monday morning. I stood up slowly. The entire team was watching me. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked uncomfortable. A few looked relieved it wasn't them. I picked up the document and walked out of the conference room without looking back. My hands were shaking. My throat was tight. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I spent the entire weekend building my case. I didn't leave my apartment. I barely slept. I went through every document in my evidence folder and organized everything in chronological order. I created a detailed timeline starting from Trevor's first request to alter the compliance data all the way through to the performance improvement plan meeting. I wrote a comprehensive summary of everything that had happened. Trevor's request to falsify the quarterly report, my refusal, the immediate retaliation, the reassigned projects, the removed system access, the poisoned reputation, the HR meeting where he'd preemptively framed me as a struggling employee, the falsified report he'd submitted under my name. I included email screenshots with full headers showing dates and timestamps. I attached the original compliance data alongside Trevor's altered version, with every discrepancy highlighted. I documented every meeting, every witness, every piece of evidence. I pulled metadata from the falsified report showing that Trevor had been the last person to edit it before submission, not me. It was airtight, irrefutable. I compiled everything into a single password-protected PDF file. Then I wrote a cover letter. It was calm, factual, and professional. But it was devastating. I read through the entire package 3 times. I checked every detail, every date, every claim. Then I saved it, backed it up in multiple locations, and closed my laptop. I was ready to fight back. On Monday morning, I learned something I hadn't known before. Something that changed everything. There was an email announcement from the Chief Compliance Officer. Cascade Financial Services was undergoing a routine regulatory audit. It happened every few years as part of standard industry oversight. External auditors from the Financial Regulatory Board would be coming in to review our recent compliance filings, risk assessments, and internal control procedures. The audit was scheduled to begin in 3 weeks. My heart skipped a beat. Trevor's falsified Q2 compliance report would absolutely be in scope for that audit. The external auditors would request our recent filings. They'd review the data. And if they compared what we'd submitted to the raw transaction data in our systems, they'd immediately spot the discrepancies. If they found the fraud themselves, the company would face massive penalties, possibly sanctions. The regulatory board didn't take falsified compliance data lightly. I sat at my desk, staring at the email, my mind racing. I had leverage I hadn't even known existed. If I brought this information to the right people before the auditors arrived, the company would be forced to act. They'd have to investigate. They'd have to fix it before the regulators found it themselves. If I stayed silent and let the auditors discover the fraud on their own, the entire firm would be at risk. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I sent the email at 9:30 on Monday morning. I addressed it to 2 people, the General Counsel and the Chief Compliance Officer. I also copied the external audit liaison, a neutral third-party consultant who coordinated between our firm and the regulatory board. My email was short and professional. I am writing to report serious concerns regarding data integrity, retaliation, and potential regulatory risk. Attached is comprehensive supporting documentation. I am available to discuss these matters immediately. I attached the password-protected PDF. Then I included the password in a separate follow-up email for security. I sat there for a long moment with my cursor hovering over the send button. My hand was shaking slightly. Once I did this, there was no taking it back. This would either save my career or end it. I thought about Trevor's face in that conference room. The way he'd humiliated me in front of my entire team. The way he'd lied and manipulated and destroyed my reputation to cover up his own fraud. I thought about Beth, forced to transfer departments just to escape him. I thought about Sam and whoever else might be next. Then I clicked send. The email whooshed out of my outbox. I closed my laptop slowly. I sat back in my chair. I exhaled a long, shaky breath. Now I had to wait. 2 days passed. I heard nothing. No response. No acknowledgement. No meeting invitation. Complete silence. I started to spiral. Had they ignored my email? Had Trevor somehow gotten to them first? Was I about to be fired for making accusations against my manager? On Wednesday, I saw Trevor in the hallway near the elevators. He was smiling, relaxed, confident. He looked completely untouchable. In our afternoon team meeting, he was especially friendly. He made a joke that got everyone laughing. Then he looked at me with this patronizing, sympathetic expression. "I know the PIP process is hard," he said in front of everyone. "But I really do believe in your potential, Kelsey. We're going to get you back on track." It was gaslighting, pure manipulation, and everyone in the room was buying it completely. I felt my resolve cracking. Maybe I'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe my evidence wasn't as solid as I thought. Maybe I'd just signed my own termination papers and ended my career in compliance. Maybe I was about to lose everything. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, second-guessing every decision I'd made. On Thursday morning, Trevor scheduled a one-on-one meeting with me. My stomach dropped when I saw the calendar invite. I walked into his office at 10 o'clock. He closed the door behind me and gestured for me to sit. He settled into his chair and leaned back casually, completely relaxed. "I wanted to check in with you," he said with a friendly smile. "I know last week was difficult, but here's the thing, Kelsey. If you sign the PP and commit to really getting back on track, this can all go away. I'm willing to personally mentor you through the 30-day improvement period. We can turn this around together." It was a power play, a performance. He thought he'd completely won. He had no idea what I'd done. No idea that my evidence package was sitting in the general counsel's inbox. No idea what was coming. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "I'm still processing everything." He nodded like a benevolent mentor. "Take the time you need, but don't take too long. We need to move forward." As I stood to leave, I glanced at his computer monitor. His Outlook calendar was open. It was suddenly full of executive meeting appointments that hadn't been there the week before. Blocked time with titles like confidential discussion and leadership sync. Something was happening behind the scenes. He just didn't know it was about him yet. That same afternoon, I received a calendar invitation that made my heart race. The subject line read, "Confidential follow-up meeting." The attendees were the general counsel, Thomas Whitmore, and an outside attorney I didn't recognize named Patricia Vance. My stomach flipped. This was real. They were taking it seriously. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning at 8 o'clock in a conference room on the executive floor. I was told to come alone and not to discuss the meeting with anyone. The actual meeting was brief and procedural. Thomas and Patricia asked me to confirm specific details from my written report. They took extensive notes. They asked clarifying questions about dates, times, witnesses, and documentation. They didn't reveal what they were thinking. They didn't make promises. But they thanked me sincerely for coming forward. They told me the matter was being taken very seriously. Then they explicitly instructed me not to discuss the investigation with anyone, especially not Trevor. As I left the building after the meeting, I passed Trevor in the lobby. He was on his phone, pacing back and forth near the windows. His voice was low and sharp. His free hand kept gesturing in frustration. He didn't notice me, but I noticed him. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a small flicker of hope. Over the next few days, Trevor's whole demeanor changed. He was tense, distracted, on edge. In our regular team meeting, he snapped at Anna over a minor formatting issue in a slide deck, then apologized too quickly. His hands kept fidgeting with his pen. He seemed unable to sit still. I overheard him on a phone call later that week. His office door was slightly open. His voice was tight and defensive. "I already explained that," he said sharply. "The report was fully vetted through proper channels. There is no issue with the data." Someone was questioning him. I didn't know who, but he was clearly rattled. That afternoon, I received another email from legal. It was brief and formal. "Please preserve all communications, documents, and files related to your manager, Trevor Haynes. Do not delete any emails or data. We may need to request additional materials as the review continues." I read it twice, my heart pounding. They weren't just taking my complaints seriously. They were actively building a case. They were gathering evidence. They were treating this as a formal investigation. Trevor had no idea how much trouble he was actually in. The next morning, an email went out to the entire compliance department. It was from the chief compliance officer, a woman named Dorothy Sinclair. The subject line read, "Internal Review." The message was carefully worded and deliberately vague. As part of our ongoing commitment to integrity and accuracy, we are conducting an internal review of recent compliance filings and departmental processes. We ask for your full cooperation during this process. If anyone has concerns or information they wish to share confidentially, please reach out directly. It was vague enough that most people wouldn't think much of it, but I knew exactly what it meant. Trevor was being investigated. Officially. Within an hour, Trevor called an impromptu team meeting. Everyone crowded into the conference room. He stood at the front looking calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "I'm sure you all saw Dorothy's email," he said with a forced smile. "It's just routine corporate stuff. Nothing to worry about. Standard procedure. They do these internal reviews periodically." Someone asked if everything was okay. Trevor laughed. It sounded hollow. "Of course. Just corporate CYA. You know how it is." But his voice was tight. His hands wouldn't stop moving. And when he looked around the room, I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before.
Panic.
A week later, I was contacted by legal again. This time, Patricia Vance, the outside employment attorney, asked me to come in for a follow-up meeting. When I arrived, she had news I hadn't expected. "2 other employees have come forward with complaints about Trevor," she said carefully. "One is a former employee. One is current. Their allegations are similar to yours. We're expanding the scope of the investigation." My chest tightened.
Who?
She couldn't give me names due to confidentiality, but she said I'd be able to speak with them if the case moved forward. I already knew one of them had to be Beth. She'd promised to back me up. Later that day, Beth texted me. I submitted a formal statement to legal about what Trevor did to me last year. I felt a surge of gratitude and relief. That afternoon, I saw Sam, the junior analyst, leaving the general counsel's office. His face was pale. Our eyes met briefly. He gave me a tiny nod. He'd come forward too. Trevor wasn't just unethical. He wasn't just a bully. He was a repeat offender. A pattern predator who'd been getting away with this for years. And now it was all coming out. The following Monday, Trevor didn't come to work. His office door stayed closed all morning. His calendar was completely cleared. There was no email. No explanation. Just absence. By lunchtime, the whispers started. People huddled in small groups near the break room, speculating. By the end of the day, someone in HR accidentally let it slip. Trevor had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal investigation. The department was in complete shock. People who'd worshipped Trevor last week were suddenly silent. Others looked nervous, probably wondering if they'd be questioned too. I kept my head down. I didn't participate in the gossip. I didn't say a word. But inside, I was shaking. It was really happening. 3 weeks later, the results came down. The internal investigation, combined with the findings from the regulatory audit, had revealed a damning pattern of misconduct. Falsified compliance data, manipulated client reports, retaliation against multiple whistleblowers, fraudulent attribution of work,
Forgery.
Trevor was terminated for cause, effective immediately. The company self-reported the compliance violations to the regulatory board to mitigate potential penalties. Trevor's name was flagged in industry databases. His securities licenses were suspended pending further investigation. His career in finance was over. I was called into a meeting with the executive leadership team. Dorothy Sinclair was there. So was Thomas Whitmore and the CEO. They apologized to me directly. They formally rescinded the performance improvement plan and removed it from my record entirely. They offered me Trevor's position as interim department head while they conducted a formal search. They also provided back pay for emotional distress and a formal commendation for integrity and courage. I sat there, numb, as they shook my hand and thanked me for coming forward. I'd won. 2 days later, I walked into Trevor's old office. It was mine now. His nameplate was gone. His personal items had been boxed up and removed. The desk was clean. The walls were bare. I sat down in the chair and looked out through the glass wall at the department floor. My former colleagues were watching. Some looked cautious. Others looked respectful. Over the next few hours, people started coming by. One by one. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner. Some congratulated me. Some just wanted to express support. I was gracious, professional, but I kept a certain distance. I knew who had stayed silent when Trevor was destroying me. I knew who had piled on. I knew who had avoided me in the hallway when I needed allies. I'd work with them. I'd be fair.
But trust?
That would have to be earned back slowly. That afternoon, I got a notification on LinkedIn. A message request from Trevor Haynes. I opened it. It was long, rambling, desperate. He said I'd misunderstood his intentions. That he'd been trying to protect the team from unrealistic executive pressure. That I'd ruined his life and career over a simple misunderstanding. I read it once. Then I deleted it without responding. He wasn't worth my words. I didn't set out to destroy Trevor's career. I set out to protect my own. But when someone tries to bury you for refusing to lie, when they weaponize your integrity against you, when they gaslight you in front of your peers and manipulate the system to make you the problem, you don't owe them mercy. You owe yourself the truth. The truth is what saved me. Not rage. Not revenge. Not some elaborate scheme. Just documentation, patience, and one well-timed email to the right people. People ask me now if I feel bad about what happened to Trevor. I don't. He made every single choice that led to his downfall. I didn't fabricate evidence. I didn't lie. I didn't exaggerate. I simply stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. I'm still at Cascade Financial. I accepted the promotion. I've been rebuilding the department from the ground up. I've set new standards based on transparency, accountability, and respect. The people who stood by me are still here. The ones who didn't now understand where they stand. I don't think about Trevor anymore. I don't check his LinkedIn profile. I don't wonder where he ended up or whether he's learned anything. He's a closed chapter. A cautionary tale I don't need to revisit. What I do think about sometimes is that moment when I almost didn't hit send. The moment when I almost let fear win. I think about how close I came to walking away in silence, accepting the injustice, disappearing quietly like Beth almost did, like so many others have done before. But I didn't. I refused to disappear. I refused to be erased. I refused to let someone else's corruption become my burden to carry in silence. And in the end, that was enough.